Or no, just okay. Here we go. You good? We'll see. All right. So when those you love pass away, the best you can do is honor their spirit for as long as you live, and you make a commitment that you're going to take whatever lesson that person is trying to teach you, and you make it true in your own life, and it's a positive way to keep the spirit alive in the world. By keeping it alive in yourself. Those words were spoken by one of the greatest actors of all time, my personal favorite, Dirty Dancing star, Patrick Swayze. This basketball court dedication will serve the students of this yeshiva and provide an outlet for them to connect with their friends in a sport that my dad loved. And my dad would have loved to watch these kids play. I took it out of the speech, but I gotta say it. He would have called every travel and double dribble. Remember, these are Israeli players. And I know this court would have created friendships and continued that spirit and legacy that my dad pursued in a place that he loved, a place, Israel, his second home, his first home, I should say. And he had an immense passion for Israel. I remember when I was 9 years old, it was 94, we went to Israel on a trip with my grandmother and my cousin, and we did a whole monster tour of, we heard you were there. We did a massive tour, and it was so special, and I'm 9 years old, Charlie was 9, so I know what it's, look at her and I'm thinking that's my age when I was there. And my dad was just electrifying. He was driving this white van, and he was so excited to be in every cool town. And we picked up 2 Israeli hitchhikers. They were a couple. They were engaged and broken English, but my dad was able to engage with them, and they spent the entire day. They became our tour guides, and ultimately joined us for dinner and breakfast the next day. Unbelievable. And my dad had a unique ability to connect with people. And if you know my dad, you know about that energy. In fact, that's why I believe that my parents always had Israeli friends around the house, just coming through.
I still do.
Still do. And my dad spoke their language. And I'm not talking about Hebrew, I'm talking about the 3 B's. Baba Ganoush, Borekas, and backgammon. My dad took me to the Arab Shuk to buy a backgammon set. Man, what a great story.
He got screwed big time.
5 massive Arab men negotiating with him. And here he is, starts off, and they're so strong and stiff, and he's holding my hand, and we're negotiating. And at first I was like, oh my God, we gotta get out of here. And by the end, they were hand-vibing, hugging, loving each other. Now, who knows what he paid for it, but it was unbelievable. Full of energy and life. I look back at those years, he had magic in the moment, whether it was with the soldiers or with the Arab salesmen. And this court is going to create those moments, that magic. And I want to thank everyone for coming. I really do. It's so nice that you're here. I want to thank Alana for helping set all this up. My mom, God knows what she's going to say. And then Rabbi Wolf's going to say a word, Brother Akutski, and then Elias going to talk about the yeshiva. So, okay, good luck, guys. I don't know if you're going to get out here at 9:45.
You got it 2 minutes. I broke a lot. I just want to say, first of all, I want to thank all the beautiful people who have come here tonight and who are on Zoom, and those who have donated, and those who might donate, and those who might consider it. It's not the point. My point is, Max was in love with his family, Eretz Yisrael. Israel was his top banana, and He valued friends because when he took me out of my comfort zone in Miami Beach in 1977, and he brought me here, and I said, "You're not sticking me in Arlington, Texas." He says, "No, I'll do you the favor. I'll work there and I'll put you in Dallas." And he said to me, "You will make the best friends ever, and we will have a family here." He really said that, and he meant it, and he kept his promises. And although some of my friends don't live here anymore, like the Dubovics and the Leaptags and various, I'm still friends with them on Zoom and still friends with them. And just now we had a reunion in Chicago of a whole group of teachers from Akiba Academy this summer. So it was very special. And Max, if he was alive, would be so proud that I kept in touch with these people. One more word. Max was a neshama. He gave unquestionably what he could. He gave of his time. He gave of his medical services. How many people didn't? They cried, "I can't, I don't have it." And he said, "Don't worry, don't worry." That's why he left me the headache with it now. And I don't mind. I cry a little, but I don't mind. And I want to tell you something. If you care the memory of Max, and he was really a good guy. We were married 51 years, and we had our ups and downs. He left me in Europe one day, I left him in Spain one day, but that's normal for marriage. And, well, my marriage at least. But he really, and we made up, don't worry, we made up. I got lost, I started screaming, Max, where are you? And he said, "I'm on the bus, get on it, But my point is, I thank you from the bottom of my heart, because I live with Max in my heart every day. It's 3 months, and I don't want him to be forgotten. And I think this is a great opportunity for many to share in his legacy, because at least I didn't compete with other women. I had a basketball as my competition.
Didn't leave you in Arlington, they left you in Spain. Good evening. I want to thank Elliot for really bringing us all together. It's a very important occasion. Torah portion is always timely. This Shabbos we read the portion of Shoftim, Judges, and we're told to set up courts all over the land of Israel. I'd stop there. Too easy. Let's get to it. Okay, so very beginning of the portion, we're commanded lo takim lecha matzeva shesaneh Hashem Elokecha. You shouldn't put up a matzeva, a pillar, a monument, which the Lord your God despises. It's an object of worship. And Rashi explains, in the time of the patriarchs, God loved the matzeva, the pillar. We find throughout the book of Genesis, when the patriarchs and matriarchs would travel to a different place, they would put up a matzeva, a monument. And that was a sign of monotheism, belief in one God. Samson Raphael Hirsch explains that during the time of the patriarchs, that was sufficient to believe in one God. That made you a member of the Jewish people. But once the Torah was given, believing in God is not enough. You have to do mitzvah, you have to be active. So matzeva is no longer acceptable. Instead, we have a mizbeach, an altar. An altar is made up of a series of rocks piled one on top of the other. Now, the fact is, we're all familiar with the word matzeva. We shouldn't know from it. Matzeva is the word we use for a burial monument, for a stone. The top of the matzeva is flat, which represents the person's deeds and actions in this world have come to an end. But as we're all familiar, and many of us will be going to visit burial places in the next few weeks before Yom Tov, the custom of when you take leave of the grave to put a pebble or a stone on top of the matzeva. What does that represent? It represents the fact that whereas the person's accomplishments may have come to an end, but we are following their example. If they taught us about tzedakah, if they taught us about hospitality, by putting a stone on their matzeva, we're showing that their lessons are continuing through us. Okay? The lessons that Max taught us in terms of patience. He had patience in the professional sense of the term. He also had great patience in being an astute teacher of basketball. Countless hours he would spend with Yavna students, teaching them the final points of the game. Countless hours he would spend with Gavi and Itzi and Akiva, also teaching them the rudiments of the game. He had great patience. He had, as we heard, a great love for the land of Israel, for Elon Mored, for the yeshiva there. And by continuing this project, by beginning and fulfilling this project, we're showing this is our way of putting those pebbles and stones on Max's matzeva. We're demonstrating that we're inculcating his lessons, his example of life into our accomplishments. So yeshikov to everyone for coming tonight. And this is really a great way to end the old year and go into the new year with this exciting project. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
The end of the parsha, the Torah talks about the Jews going out to battle, and there is the Jews going out to battle. There is the Torah describes how there was a Kohen whose job it was to rally the troops, gives them a pep talk. Don't worry, you're going to win. God is going before you. Anybody who is afraid or has a number of a series of others interests, get home. We've got a job to do, and we're going to win. When I read this section, I think of another Kohen who won many pep talks over the course of his career. Now, obviously, a high school basketball team is not a battlefield situation, even though Max probably thought it was. But the idea is the same. Gave them a charge, gave them a sense of confidence, and built their character. That was what the Kohen did in the time of battle, and that is what Meir ben Yisrael HaKohen did. Wasn't just a builder of teams, he was a builder of men. He created mention by his example, by his teaching, by the teaching that he taught explicitly, and by the teaching that, as Wolf said, that he taught by example. Just seeing him in shul every morning consistently, seeing him duchening every yontif with his family. It wasn't just the other team members, it was the men that he built up the most, or the three extraordinary men, his family. And that is what we think about when we think about what is an appropriate monument, or an appropriate way to memorialize his name and his legacy. There's no question. Rav Lichtenstein talks about how sports is often a way of, the way a person engages in sport is a way of determining, or a way of seeing what their true character is. And there's no question that the young men that are going to be competing, perhaps a little aggressively on this court, are going to be shaped, at least in part, into the extraordinary young men that they're going to become because of the example and because of the facility that is the name of Max Ribald. Let us also follow that example. You don't have to be a basketball player to emulate Max. Let us incorporate the lessons that he taught us into our lives.
Amen. So, for those of you who don't know me,
I know you, that's what's important.
my name is Elliot Cahan, I'm the Director of Development. I usually say the Shiva Hezder of Lomoran, or it's the Beit Midrash institutions of Lomoran. In general, I come here once a year in November and I walk up to you and give you an envelope, or we meet, or we talk, and I've never actually done anything like this, and I never sort of envisioned that my next time that I would come to Dallas would be to do something like this, and so it's very emotional, and I want to take a few minutes. Actually, when you write things down, you know it's like for a fundraiser, it's pretty serious, because. But I'd like to take a few minutes to I have to speak about who Max Ribald, Olav Shalom, Mary Yisrael, and Frumachana Kohen was to me, and why I think the Max Ribald basketball court project is something that he would have been behind 150%. I first met Max and Monica in November of 2015 on my very first trip on behalf of Alon Morat. Max's involvement with our organization began in April of 2000. He was one of those people that you could always, that you could count on year after year. Between his first donation and last year, he only missed 2 years. But there were numerous years when he donated more than once. He was a member of our board, and he took a keen interest in the growth of our organization and was a sounding board for ideas and suggestions. Max and I connected on a personal level. We shared a love of sports, in particular basketball. I felt that there was something spiritual, almost spiritual, when Rabbi Wolk and Max would get together and talk about the old days. I think it was BTA or MTA, I don't know, it's all New York to me. Okay, I'm an out-of-towner, okay? But they would talk about the old days, and this past November, when I was here in Dallas, I had dinner at the Ribalds as I was wont to do. And so on Friday night, and Zach joined us. And so at the time, if you remember, there was this whole big fervor about the YU team, okay, and how they were on this win streak. And I'll never forget how happy Max was. And like, he just, the sparkle in his eyes, and the two of them, and Zach, and everybody, and talking about, you know, Yavna, everything, it all just flowed together. And it's hard to believe that that was the last time that I actually saw Max. It was also impossible to leave the Ribald home hungry. And as you mentioned the 3 Bs, I apologize for there not being breakfast here tonight. It's my that's the other part of being a Jew. Sometimes you're a little bit cheap, or whatever. But Max a lot of times would host me for breakfast and made sure that I had enough to eat. Es mein Kind, es, he would always say. He would, and Max had a hard time believing that I didn't like lox, herring, liver, and gefilte fish. But as you can see, I never left their home hungry. Max and Monica have been mentors to me. They've taken a great deal of interest in my family, and each in their own unique way have been more than willing to help advise and guide me. Max and I shared a love of Eretz Israel. Max was always eager to hear what was going on in Israel. And since life has never gone in Israel, there was never enough time to discuss every political twist and turn. So what is it about? What is it about a bunch of teenagers studying in the Alon Morat, a place in the periphery of the country that most of you more than likely have never heard of, and even more likely couldn't find on the map? I did bring maps that connected with Max. So this week's Parsha, where I reference this week's Parsha, enumerates many of the mitzvot that are applicable to a Kohen. Things like the Kohanim, Shevet Levi, didn't inherit a part of the land. When there was a war, they didn't get any of the spoils from the war. If you shecht an animal, you're supposed to give 3 parts of the animal to the Kohen. We're supposed to give truma to the Kohen, and if you own a certain amount of sheep, you give the first shearing to the Kohen. So the Sefer HaChinuch explains that one of the reasons that now I'm not part of that, I'm a Kohen as well, but you, okay, those of you who aren't Kohanim, provided much of the needs of the Kohanim was because the Kohanim were so focused on serving Hashem and acting as the representatives of the entire nation. You are grateful to them for acting on our behalf, that we reward them with gifts and truma. We want them to focus on their holy work. Each and every day we pray fervently for the Kohanim to be returned to their rightful place so that they can serve Hashem. As we've said, Max was a Kohen. And like his fellow Kohanim, he too looked forward to the day that he would be able to work in the Beit HaMikdash in Jerusalem. However, despite the fact that he wasn't able to do his real priestly job as described in the Torah, there's no question in my mind that Max Ribald was focused on representing the Jewish people and doing the work of the Jewish people. He was a leader in every sense of the word. He and Monica helped establish this community as a healthcare provider. He always had time to take care of people, whether they could pay or not pay. He was happy to see people in his house at all times of the day and night. He was driven, Monica told me this. He was driven to help and give. Max's definition of community extended well beyond the city limits of Dallas. Israel was very much his community as well. The people that lived in Yehuda and Shomron, Gaza, and the Golan, all were very much his community as well. He didn't see these wonderful Jews as settlers, but as Kohanim, leaders, teachers, people who are dedicated to Am Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. Ironically, in last week's Parsha, we mentioned the Lo Moreh is the first place in Eretz Yisrael that the Jewish people